Murder and Such contains true stories about murders, the macabre, true crime, serial killers, and other dark subject matter. This includes adult themes, explicit language, descriptions of gore, violence, and other information provided by news articles, witness testimony, and public record. Murder and Such is not intended for all audiences, and although warnings will be set in place, listener discretion is still advised.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Murder and Such. I am your host, Hunter. Now, as I do with every episode, I start the show off with a little bit of housekeeping to thank all of the lovely people who have either interacted or left a review or have even joined the Patreon. So a special thank you to Stephanie Marie for becoming an executive producer for the show. It's one thing to join the show at a $1 level, but when you just go off the bat as an executive producer, that's truly amazing. Thank you, Stephanie. And I've got another Stephanie by the name of Stephanie Jacobson, who actually had a little email exchange with me, and apparently she decided that she wanted to start supporting the show after watching an episode on the Murder and Such YouTube channel. And yes, I do have a YouTube channel, but I don't update it as much as I update the audio podcast, because that takes a lot more time. And a triumphant return to the lovely Miss Casey Jones for joining the Patreon once again. And, of course, I have to thank my beloved, how every garage band, their mom is their biggest fan. Well, I do have to say that my sister is one of my biggest fans, and she jumped her pledge to the executive producer level at $5. So thank you, Sarah. I do appreciate you. I love you. NFC. Now, I also want to thank a couple of people who left reviews on Apple Podcasts. So a thank you to Sarah Smile 8383 that said, "I love to listen to this podcast while I'm at work. I work night shift at a hospital, and it's nice to have something interesting to keep me awake." So, honestly, no, thank you, Sarah, for leaving a review and for listening to the show. That truly means a lot to me. And I want to thank DSK713 for saying, "Love the podcast, gonna join the Patreon." Well, if that's what you want to do, that's completely up to you. But if you just listen, that means everything to me. And I want to also put out a thank you to somebody who stumbled across my podcast. And that woman's name is Jara Wilson. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you would know that on episode 70, I covered the case of Jara Wilson. And she was murdered by a kid named Tucker McGee. Jara said that she was wondering if people had forgotten about Jara, and she stumbled across the episode of Murder and Such where I covered her unfortunate murder at such a young age. And that episode was actually referred to me by a listener by the name of Holly. And, sometimes when it comes to podcasting, we all, well, especially with true crime, we all cover these cases of these murders, of these people and these victims that had their life cut short, or they're just no longer with us because of the actions of another person. And I would be wrong if I said that I sometimes forget that people still exist on the other sides of these cases, that there are still loved ones that feel this pain that I talk about every single day. I even had the parent of another episode that I covered reach out to me. And, the show used to be something more funny. Like, my old co-hosts and I would try to make jokes and make it lighthearted. And since the show has gone solo, it's gotten a lot more serious. And I'd say in combination with the seriousness of this and with my therapy, I've become a lot more empathetic. And I still need to be grounded sometimes. I still need to be brought down to earth and remember that, you know, when I hit that button and I stop recording and I hit that button and I publish an episode, there's still people that feel this pain that I'm describing, that live this horror that they've experienced, and that I talk about the worst days of these people's lives and I move on to another one. But I'd be remiss if I said that there's a part of me with every episode, and there's a part of me that drives me to do certain episodes. I'm not going to do a Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm not going to do a Ted Bundy. You guys know those stories. I like to bring up these people and show these victims in a positive light, because that's how they should be remembered. This episode is very vulgar when it comes to the perpetrators of this case, because it's the reason of why they did this is something that I have the complete polar opposite feeling about. And I think that that's what's making me want to do this one. And I don't know. I do struggle with these at times. And I don't ever want you guys to think that I take joy in covering these murders and covering these cases, and the way that the show has changed over the past couple of years. It's almost how I wanted Murder and Such to be from the beginning, where nobody knew about Evelyn Miller, and nobody knew about how horrible Casey Fredrickson was. They just knew that he was in jail on child porn charges, and now he's charged with murder. I've spoken with Evelyn's stepmother, and I worked with her, and I want to do these episodes that not only am I proud to make, but I'm proud to have you guys listen to. And I know this is super long-winded, and this is unscripted. I appreciate everybody who listens to the show, who leaves a comment, who leaves a like, who joins the Patreon, who does all of these things. But it's a lot different when the people that you're talking about reach out to you. So, Jara, if you're listening to this, thank you for bringing me back down to ground level. But I don't know if you should thank me for keeping her memory alive. What happened with Jure can never be undone. And none of us who listen to these episodes will feel the pain, the anguish, and the sorrow that you do every single day. But one thing I can say is I believe that by doing her episode, a little piece of Jure lives inside of everybody who listens to these episodes, who want to know her story, and want to remember her for the teenager who wore Chuck Taylors and had piercings and tattoos and stuff, just like I do to this day. But we also empathize with your loss. We humanize who she was, and we demonize Tucker. So, thank you again, Jara. It really hits hard. But I need those punches in the gut every now and again. So, welcome to Murder and Such. Sorry about my very long, I don't even know if you want to call that an intro. But, anyways, thank you to the two Stephanies and Casey and my sister for joining the Patreon or upping their pledge. And thank you for dropping a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That also means very much to me. So, without further ado, let's get into this episode. Now, I'm going to give you a heads up on the beginning of this episode. It may get somewhat political at times, and I know that that really turns off a lot of people who just want to listen to true crime. Trust me when I say that this will not involve any current or former administration except for the mention of one president, and it's not who you think it is, but it does follow the topic of immigration. If that does not sit well with you, then I completely understand, and I thank you for checking in. I will give my personal views on immigration as well, much like I did with the Jason Todd Reddy episode back on episode 65. Again, these points are relevant to this case and the suspects themselves, but this is honestly a truly horrific story. So let me get my standing out of the way real quick. No human is illegal. Sure, there's rules and regulations that people believe are the end-all be-all of entering the United States. I do believe that asylum is a very just cause. We all know or have heard horror stories about what can happen, not just in the US, but also in Mexico. Cartels run amok, there's a huge statistical disparagement of domestic violence, and I think that anyone who needs the help and needs a better life is not classified as illegal. They're human. Now, I've worked for immigrants. I've worked with undocumented immigrants, and the one thing that I walked away from each person was that they are just as human as I am. You know, me, a straight white dude from the Midwest. But the suspects in this episode most definitely didn't think the same way. Some people of a certain sensationalistic demographic will think of Hispanics or Latino people as illegal immigrants or even aliens. But the extreme ones will think of them as enemies and parasites. Those thoughts and feelings have only gotten worse over time. Chants of build that wall or putting humans needing help in the crosshairs of political discourse is not only disgusting in my opinion, but I also believe that it's inhuman. I will never, for the life of me, understand why there is a demonizing of these people. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's start this episode. As always, my name is Hunter, and you're listening to Murder and Such, and I thank you for suffering through my diatribe and opinion. This is episode 82, The Flores Home Invasion. The main person in this episode, and arguably the least sheepish of the bunch, is a woman currently by the name of Shauna Candace Lee Ford. She's also been known to go by Shauna Candace Brighton, Shauna Breichtman, Shauna Eddy, Shauna Duffy. She's had a lot of marriages and divorces. She was born on December 6th of 1967. Where exactly was she born? All I can tell you is Washington State, but I can't tell you exactly for sure. Throughout much of her younger life, she spent time in and out of foster care and also in and out of juvenile detention centers. Some of the charges include underage drinking, burglary, small-time theft, and possession of a controlled substance, believed to be marijuana. She was kind of a hellion, to say the least. But I won't sit here and point the finger that she's a bad person quite yet because of her juvenile record. I always make it a point to say that our brains are not fully developed until the age of 25. But her early life was tumultuous to say the very least. It wasn't until she was 19 that she was first married. Since she didn't really have the most stable of homes growing up or maintained a job throughout their short marriage, she lacked of what a lot of people would consider conventional forms of relationship building. Shortly after her and her first husband had divorced, Shauna was picked up in Washington state on account of prostitution. Her run-ins with the law would see her both as a victim and a criminal. In 1989, a warrant was issued for her arrest after she beat her boyfriend at the time and then tried to play the victim by saying she was going to slit her wrist with a serrated steak knife. An investigation ensued and they didn't fully charge her and dismissed the case in December of 1990. In 1993, a motion was filed against Shauna Eddy and her husband at the time that they needed to be evicted. From what I could find, there were amounts of drugs that Shauna had been using and it violated her tenant agreement. She later would be divorced from him the following year after her husband had beaten her and she had him arrested on account of domestic violence in December of 1994. Another motion of dissolution of marriage would be filed in December of 1999, filed by Shauna Duffy. That would be certified on March of 2000. Now, in the meantime, Shauna had a lot of misdemeanor, small-time criminal charges, this, that, the other. She wasn't trying to get herself on a path of straight and narrow, but it wouldn't be until 10 years later that she faces the biggest charges of her criminal record. Now, my personal opinion, in cases like hers, you would imagine that maybe seeing the red and blue flashing lights all the time would be a deterrent from a life of crime, and you'd possibly want to find some people who would help her maintain a decent path for her life. That wouldn't happen at all. She met a man by the name of Jason Eugene Bush who had an equally troubled past. Jason Bush, before the final incident, was suspected of being a potential serial killer. Jason Bush was being followed by the FBI in 1997, and they had documented him as being a skinhead and joining the Aryan Brotherhood. In other words, a fucking white supremacist and Nazi sympathizer. Growing up, he also had a litany of legal troubles, including theft and weapons charges, including one count, according to the Washington Herald, that he had brought a bayonet on a field trip. Now at 19, he was already a father and was facing more legal troubles for bouncing checks out of Coeur d'Alene and other areas. He spent time in and out of a Washington state prison, but when he was released, he went around the country for a bit, also getting into trouble for hanging out with the Aryan Nation. In 1997 is when he moved to Wenatchee, Washington, and started stealing from his employer at the time, as well as other weapons violations. However, around the same time as his short stint in that town, 2 people were found to have been murdered. In July of 97, a man by the name of Hector Lopez Partida was stabbed to death in Wenatchee, and in September of 1997, a man named Jason Bumstead, who Jason referred to as a, quote, race traitor, was shot twice, once in the back and one more time in the head with a .270 caliber rifle. Jason has been charged with 2 counts of murder, one for each person that was killed. According to the police, a .22 caliber gun was sold at a pawn shop that had the same rifling pattern as a slug that was found at the scene where Jonathan Bumstead was murdered. The .270 caliber was stolen from his property but never recovered. Investigators looking into Hector's murder had interviewed people who had stated that they had heard Jason Bush bragging that he killed a Mexican and Jonathan Bumstead. They later found DNA evidence that linked him to both of those murders, but that didn't come until after the events that this case focuses around. Now eventually, Shauna and Jason meet up and start discussing what they could possibly do to make a living. For the longest time, Shauna stated how she hated the politics of Washington state and how the cops were always targeting her instead of the other who were allegedly criminals. When she met up with Jason, he started to season her hatred with some very prominent racism. Now, let's get this out of the way. Shauna is pretty stupid. I personally don't feel bad about talking smack about her because, considering her lengthy criminal history, her inability to change, grow up, and the path that it led her down, it was very easy for Jason to manipulate her smooth brain with his hardcore white supremacy, and they both become racist cartons of broken glass and used condoms together. Now, with Jason's ardent hatred for Hispanics, since he kind of wants to get the hell out of Washington, he makes some contacts with the Aryan Nation out of Tucson, Arizona, which welcome him down with open arms. For the time being, both Shauna and Jason start doing odd jobs, making connections, and finding some more work to do. But with Shauna having a chip on her shoulder and hatred in her heart, she starts looking around and noticing that there is a far greater Latino population in Arizona than in Washington state. In the 2010 census, it was reported that the Latino population of Washington was 11.2%, but Arizona, it was 29.6%. Granted, this is a year after the incident takes place, but the numbers in both states were well on their rise. Either way, there was a much more vibrant cultural difference between the two states, which embraced Latino heritage and culture. All that did was fill Jason and Shauna with hatred and resentment. Now, you can't just look at a person and know whether or not they've immigrated or they're undocumented. Sure, the highest nation that comes in the United States are people from Mexico, but the second come from China, the third come from India, the fourth come from the Dominican Republic, the fifth is the Philippines, and the list goes on and on. But you can't look at someone and just think that because they're of a different skin tone or speak a different language that they're automatically illegal. It takes a little bit of cognitive effort to realize that, yeah, people come here from other countries. But you know who else did that? Fucking white people. This isn't virtue signaling, it's literally history. Either way, dipshit Jason and turd token Shauna decide to join themselves a little faction and join with the MCDC, otherwise known as the Minuteman Civil Defense Corps. The best way that I can describe these shitbags is the poor man's border patrol. The same group that Jason Todd Reddy, the neo-Nazi from episode 65, also liked to run around with. This particular labeling that they went by was founded on April 1st of 2005, which, ironically enough, is April Fool's Day. Maybe they just didn't get the joke. But the nearly 900 volunteer group was a radicalized faction of American nationalism that spent their days scouring the border for people crossing into America and would sometimes detain them until Border Patrol showed up or just make a phone call. Again, cosplaying Border Patrol agents, and yes, with bunny ears around agents. Now, for the most part, these people were pretty low-level paint chip eaters who just wanted to do something with their time. But they also felt like they had no life's purpose. Again, we're all immigrants here in America. Today, the Minuteman Civil Defense Corps has since disbanded after the president, a woman by the name of Carmen Mercer, had sent off an email stating that, quote,
"For 8 long years, we Minutemen played nice, yet for the past 8 years, we firmly expressed our opinions and desires for the border to be secured. This muster will be completely different. President Barack Obama and John McCain have left us no choice. This March, we return to the border locked, loaded, and ready to stop each and every individual we encounter along the frontier that is now more dangerous than the frontier of Afghanistan."
End quote. Again, radicalized. But the same people who hate immigrants were in a group founded by a man named Chris Simcox, who was found guilty of child molestation on June 8th of 2016 and is now behind an Arizona prison wall for the next 19 and a half years. That's the founder of that organization. Now, one thing that Carmen had said that really struck a tone was with how she stated that they've played nice or whatever. That struck a tone with Shauna. I can't say for sure if she saw Carmen as weak or unable to do a good job as Shauna believed she could do. So Shauna got kicked out of the faction because she wanted to start up her own little faction.
This is Shauna Ford, Minutemen American Defense.
If you didn't catch that, that was Shauna Ford from Minutemen American Defense, or MAD for short. This was an even more violent faction that she wanted to start. And she also had another means of recruiting people. She absolutely loved the camera time. Without a doubt, she was no stranger to putting on her horrible ideologies for all the world to see. So she started doing interviews and trying to recruit as many people as possible to join her faction, and was no stranger to the camera and getting her name out there. What? Oh, you heard that? I gotta give my cat some treats. I'm gonna take a break and I'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's get back into these absolutely horrendous people. Now, I'm going to play an audio clip so you can understand her reasoning and logic behind her ideologies. She speaks as if these are completely true statements and spouts them with conviction. The audio is kind of old and it is pretty lengthy, but I just want you to understand how she can go about spouting these things and why people who may be racist or may be anti-immigration can just latch onto her like she is the end-all be-all on immigration. Here's that audio.
We are now joined by Yakima Valley residents and a number of invited guests who will share with us their insights on the immigration issue. Joining us up front here tonight, Shauna Ford, a member of the Minutemen and a representative of the Federation of American Immigration Reform, a national group concerned about border security. What do we need to do to fix it?
Well, it's pretty easy. Title 8, Law 1324 states that if you hire somebody who's illegal, it's a crime. So what makes this nation a wonderful nation and one of the greatest nations on earth is we are a nation of laws. And I agree that there needs to be some reform, but at what cost? And why is it that we have to keep flipping the bill as a middle-class America? And the degradation to our society and our sovereignty is incredible. It's not fair, it's wrong, and I would encourage every single person to get educated on how much we're spending in this state, which is upward to $500 million in illegal immigration. And they come here and they continue to come here, and it's not just Hispanics, it's all races. We need to have border security. It's essential. Most people forget about 9/11, but can any of you tell me out of the 100,000 illegal immigrants which one of them were a terrorist? Anybody?
Yep, that is Shauna Ford during a PBS interview regarding immigration. There is a panel of people on that tape, and she is the most outspoken of them all. I have a certain, I don't know how to put it. Anytime that somebody references 9/11, I typically just kind of shut down any argument they have after that. You can't use 9/11 as a scapegoat. You can't use 9/11 to push your agenda. That is the weakest of arguments, and honestly, in my personal opinion, when you start using 9/11 as your scapegoat for your racism and bigotry, you've already lost the argument. Here's some more.
How would you respond to the people that say that we are concerned about border security, but the fact is that the people that came and attacked us on September 11th came here legally?
Actually, they did not. 4 of them were pulled over and were in illegal status, but the police officers didn't have the authority to detain them, so they released them, and a week and a half later 9/11 happened.
Is this issue
so you
for
need
you
to look at that.
all about illegal immigration? What about the economics?
No, it's also about the draining on our tax benefits. 16,000 babies born at the Kennedy Hospital last year, nobody paying their deficit, 80 hospitals being shut down in the country this year alone because of the illegal deficit, using our health care system, not paying the bills of the health care system, and it just goes on and on and on. And how about not assimilating into our society and learning English? Immigrants that came here, like your parents that became legal citizens, I'm sure they went through a whole process to become a legal citizen.
If you and I have a difference of opinion on immigration, politics, social issues, we can maybe learn something from one another. But I don't think that using the largest single attack on American soil as your justification and your indoctrination method to get people to be afraid of people crossing the border illegally, being undocumented immigrants, any of that, is really a good tactic. It's effective. I will give it that. But a good tactic? No. Not even at all. This PBS town hall that she participated in almost emboldened her to want to be the most outspoken person of her own Minutemen faction. She was trying to push a security system. She was trying to push the safety of others as her agenda. Yet, she was very, very hateful when she was doing it. This managed to grab the attention of multiple outlets, and Shauna was always open to doing interviews, talking about the cause that she was trying to make, and she managed to grab herself quite a few volunteers for the Minutemen American Defense. Now, one time in 2009, she managed to grab the attention of a Belgian film crew who wanted to answer the international question of why is America so afraid of immigrants? So Grizzly Films headed out to the town of Arivaca, Arizona, to do a small documentary about Minutemen American Defense. That is where the next audio excerpts are coming from.
What we do here in the desert of Arizona is that we scout and we track, and then we set up traditional posts and recon teams to go out and assist law enforcement in intelligence as far as if somebody's coming through. If we see somebody coming through, we first usually will give them aid. Then we'll report them to Border Patrol or Sheriff, depending on the area that we're in, and they'll come in and they'll arrest them and pick them up and take them out. We're not a third world country. We're not getting people, scientists and lawyers and doctors here, okay? We're getting the poor of the poor. We're getting third world values into a first-rate country, which is dropping all of our rates way down. This is an issue. So it's not country first.
It's pretty crazy that you can pinpoint where she's going from. We help these people, and then, we're going to have the authorities come and take care of them, and then just starts in about American values compared to third world countries. This woman is so vile and hateful. Then again, she starts clutching her pearls and starting in about, well, you can just about guess it.
I think after 9/11, it made us really realize what a target we are and how many people out there would like to see us dead. And I'm not sure which part of I want to kill you we don't understand, but I understand it. And because I understand that, I want to make sure that I can do my part in helping to get these borders secured and educate Americans on the issues of the southern border. And there's a lot of issues here.
I don't think she's one to be able to point fingers at what the issues are. She definitely sounds like she has a lot of issues. So Shauna really wanted to be in front of the camera practically as much as she possibly could, because not only did it get her name out there, it got her militia out there as well. She didn't care about spewing her vitriol, her hate speech, and her fucked up logic. She just cared about being famous. And only a few months after this interview, she would become not only famous, but infamous. Now that's going to bring us to the town of Arivaca, Arizona. Arivaca's population as of 2019 is 723 people. It is a very small town, not even 15 miles away from the US-Mexico border. When it comes to the town of Arivaca, since there are so few people living there, a lot of the people just want to keep to themselves. A lot of people don't ask too many questions, and mostly just want to be left alone. It was said that back in the mid to late 2000s, Arivaca became somewhat of a haven for drug activity. And of course, when it comes to drug activity, you're probably going to be dealing with Mexican cartel. So a lot of the population of Arivaca kind of went off of a policy of see something, say nothing when it comes to seeing that activity. However, with Shauna, she decided that she was going to be playing DEA agent and try to confront these people who may or may not be carrying drugs into Arivaca and the rest of the United States.
There's a constant war going on between law and illegal and drug cartel and LeMay, and it's a constant headbutting and constant war, and cartels fighting with each other, trying to get territory, and then people trying to push their stuff, and then we're over here trying to stop it, and so it gets a little aggressive and a little intense out here, especially at night. When the sun goes down here, all bets are off. You're constantly aware out here. I feel very secure. You will appreciate the fact if I have a gun if the time occurs. You will be very sorry that you did not have one. So,
to some listeners who may not be in America, yes, we are a gun-toting nation, if you will. We have the right to bear arms, and I myself am a Second Amendment supporter. I think we can do better when it comes to acquiring firearms, but I digress. That's for a different episode. But we do have people who are very strict, as we call gun nuts or ammo-sexuals. They are the ones that will have an arsenal in their basement, and I'm not saying that an arsenal is a bad thing, but it really makes me wonder if there's a home invasion and they have 4 AR-15s and a bunch of Glocks and maybe some Taurus or even some shitty high points, how are they going to be able to use all of those at one time? But guns are expensive. Ammo right now is very expensive. And running a militia takes money, time, effort, donations, and volunteers. Throughout Shauna's history with Minutemen American Defense, which was known as being much more of a active Minuteman organization, she decided that she was going to grab herself a piece of property out by Arivaca. A lot of the other volunteers who joined up with Minutemen American Defense were sleeping in tents or bringing their trailers along. But to sustain an organization like this, you need to have money. And money just so happened to be the hardest thing that Shauna could get her hands on. That's when she started conspiring with Jason Bush, who had his brand new recruitee by the name of Albert Gaxiola. Now, Albert Gaxiola had a little bit of a checkered past, as he was imprisoned from 1992 until 2000 on charges of marijuana distribution and a grow operation. But although he spent 8 years behind bars, he still had a lot of connections with people who were taking part in the drug trade. That's when they came up with the idea that they would find people who were selling or distributing marijuana or other drugs, and then proceed to rob them of their cash to hopefully keep this Minutemen American Defense, the almighty American dream, still alive and active. When it came to the citizens of Arivaca, they knew exactly who Shauna Ford was. And let's just say that the Minutemen American Defense was not too welcome with the citizens of Arivaca. However, before the events actually unfolded, there was kind of a let's just call it a little massive fuck up on the FBI's part. There was a time in May of 2009 that Shauna Ford went to a truck stop outside of Denver, Colorado. The reason was that she was trying to recruit some more muscle to help them take down a possible drug kingpin in the town of Arivaca. The intel that they were working off of was provided by Albert Gaxiola. When Shauna arrived at the truck stop, she met up with two men by the names of Ron and Robert, who were actually two FBI informants who were looking to bring charges against Shauna. When meeting up with them, they had drawn a very crude map as to where they were going to hit. The two men took the map that she had drawn and submitted it to the FBI field office out of Phoenix, Arizona, where it was passed around, but nothing ever came of it, which is incredibly unfortunate. The feds can be very incompetent at times. They never did a single thing. Some would chalk it up to bureaucratic red tape or sheer incompetence, but the map was just eventually destroyed. Nothing about the planned attack. The men never met back up with Shauna, and the feds did absolutely nothing about it. They had the information, they had the details, they even had the names of Albert Gaxiola and Gunny Bush. Jason often went by the name Gunny, because he's an egotistical prick like that. But they never did anything. And that level of incompetence would not only be reprehensible, it would soon turn deadly. On the night of May 29th, 2009, it would be the day that turned Arivaca, Arizona from a very small border town into a national spotlight for white supremacy, vigilante justice, and deadly consequence. Going off of the information that Albert Gaxiola had, the plan was to hit a small trailer in Arivaca that belonged to Raul Jr. Flores and his wife, Gina Gonzalez, their 12-year-old daughter, and their 9-year-old daughter, Brezenia Flores. That night, Brezenia was hanging out with her mother and father while her sister was away at her grandmother's house. Brezenia had just gotten a new puppy, and when she said that she wanted to sleep with the dog, her parents told her that if she wanted to, she would have to sleep on the couch in the living room. Now, Raul, who often went by the name Junior, had been known to do some small-time weed deals here and there. Nothing to the level of, let's say, Walter White from Breaking Bad, but he had done some small-time sales. However, for the last few months, he had been working a new full-time job, making an honest living for his wife and daughters. He was doing construction work, making some good money and a comfortable living for he and his family, wanting to wash his hands of the trade and stick more to an honest and straight and narrow path. However, one of the people who knew of his prior business with the drug trade just happened to be Albert Gaxiola. To Albert, Junior wasn't a small-time dealer. He was a drug kingpin and what he considered to be competition. He knew nothing of his intentions to leave everything behind. And I can't say for sure if Albert was afraid of Shauna, but when thinking about Jason and his history of violence, especially against minorities, I don't think it would be far-fetched to say that he would be afraid of Jason Bush. So he baked into Shauna and Jason's head that Junior Flores had tons of money from the drug trade, he had tons of jewelry, cash, and drugs on hand that they could take if they wanted, that could help fund their little Minuteman organization. And on that Saturday night, they headed down to that small town on the border of Arizona and Mexico, and they went to the Flores trailer to take what they believed was theirs. I'm going to take another small break, and I'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm warning you right now, from here on out, the story becomes incredibly graphic and severely disturbing. You have been warned. On the morning of May 30th, 2009, Shauna Ford, Jason Bush, and Albert Gaxiola dress up in camouflage gear. Jason's face was painted black, and they head to the Flores home at around 1 o'clock in the morning when they knocked on the door. Not knowing why there would be anyone knocking on his door after midnight on a Saturday night, Junior Flores gets up and heads to the door with Gina Gonzalez still sitting on the couch. They're met with two people with rifles and pistols at the ready. They explain to Junior and Gina that they are looking for escaped convicts who might be hiding in their house, and they explain to them that they're searching everyone's houses around the area for these escapees. They also tell them that their house is being surrounded by DEA and ICE agents looking for the escaped inmates. Shauna demanded that they let them into the house or else they were going to shoot them. They reluctantly let them inside and were ordered to sit on the couch where 9-year-old Brezenia Flores was sleeping. But something caught Junior's eye. The gun that Jason was carrying had duct tape on it. Now, when it comes to the feds, they have all the money in the world to make sure that their pistols, rifles, and gear are all in check, and if there's something wrong with it, it's usually either decommissioned or repaired before it's ready for field use once again. Junior knew that something was wrong with that gun that had duct tape on it, so we asked Jason about it, and Jason replied with,
Don't take this personally, but this bullet has your name on it.
Junior then flew up off the couch and charged at Jason, but Jason pulled the trigger once, striking Junior in the chest and sending him back. He then proceeds to shoot Gina Gonzalez twice, once in the leg and once in the torso. Gina fell down to the ground and, well, luckily for her, she pretended to be dead, but she was still very much alive. Junior shouted at Jason to stop shooting, so Jason proceeds to shoot him 5 more times, killing him on the spot. In the meantime, Shauna and Albert are rummaging through the house. Jason then sits down on the couch and starts questioning 9-year-old Brezenia Flores where the drugs, money, and jewelry are. This poor innocent girl just woke up to the sound of gunfire and her mom and dad lying dead on the ground. It's unfathomable for anyone to even think what must be running through this little girl's head. So Jason interrogates her, but he doesn't get the answers that he's looking for. So he then takes his .45 caliber pistol and shoots Brezenia sideways through her face, then one more point blank through the temple, killing Brezenia Flores instantly. What happens next is what I can only describe as the most terrifying 911 call that I have ever heard.
911, where's emergency?
Ma'am, somebody just came in and shot my daughter and my husband.
They shot them?
Please send me
What's your
Arivaca.
And they shot your husband and your daughter? Are they out conscious?
Please, ma'am, please. She's bleeding out of her mouth. Please.
How old is your daughter?
She's 10.
10? And where were they shot?
In the head. In the head. Should I pick her up so she's not bleeding?
No, I want you to leave her where she is, okay? What I'm going to do, are they still there, the people who are there that shot him?
As I mentioned previously, Gina Gonzalez was still very much alive, but merely playing dead with a bullet wound to her leg and torso. She managed to get a phone and call 911, but after dialing 911 and then the 3 murderers leaving, they didn't find much of anything worth value in the house, and Shauna had decided to go back in, and she sees that Gina is still breathing and on the phone. She runs back out of the house and tells the others to go back and finish her off.
Are they still there, the people who are there that shot him?
They're coming back in. They're coming back in.
Do you know who they are?
Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Let me know.
During the gunfight, Gina manages to shoot Jason Bush in the leg with a pistol that Junior Flores kept in the house for personal protection. Bullets ricochet in the kitchen, striking the fridge and the stove and walls, but luckily when Jason gets hit in the leg, they retreat out of the house and didn't manage to get anything else that belonged to the Flores family. The call then continues.
Hello? Are you still there? Are you okay?
Ma'am, I don't know. I'm scared.
Okay, how many people were there?
I don't know, ma'am. I was asleep and I can't even move. I've been shot myself.
Okay, where were you shot?
I think I'm shot in the leg. I'm not sure, ma'am.
Okay.
Please hurry.
Are you armed?
Yeah.
Okay, they're coming. Lights and sirens. Okay, they are coming.
Ma'am, please hurry.
And did you see any of them?
No, I didn't. I just got up, ma'am, because they told us that somebody was had escaped jail or something. They want to come in and look at my house, and they just shot my husband, and they shot my daughter, and they shot me.
Okay.
Oh my God, ma'am! I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah, they are coming. Okay. You said that they told your husband that they wanted to come in because there's a escape person?
Yes, and that the whole party was surrounded. I'm sorry, that the whole property was surrounded with border patrol and everything. Oh, fuck, my leg is killing me, ma'am. How long is it going to take them to get here?
The authorities arrived on scene, and they didn't find Jason or Albert or Shauna, but they did see that there was a trail of blood leaving away with some tire tracks following suit. When they found Gina, they found her in the kitchen, still barely clutching to life from her injuries. They also found the bodies of 29-year-old Raul Jr. Flores and 9-year-old Brazenia Yelana Flores in the living room. The dispatcher then asks Gina if she had a description of what the assailants looked like.
And did it sound like males were talking?
There was a male and there was a shorter, fat woman.
Okay, now the woman, what did she look like? Was she a Hispanic female?
No, she was a white, short woman.
Okay.
And I have one of their guns here that they fucking left.
Okay,
here.
Don't touch that, okay? Do not touch that.
I'm sorry that
No, you're fine. Fine, you're fine, don't worry, it's fine. Just don't worry about your cussing. Can you remember the clothing that the female was wearing?
They're all dressed in camouflage.
Like green camouflage?
I couldn't tell, and the guy is like super tall.
And the male, was he also white?
Yes.
Okay.
And then a Mexican came in.
So there was a white male, a white female, and a Mexican male?
Yes.
And was he tall or was he like average?
No, he was like almost 6'something.
He was tall also?
They shot me and I pretended like I was dead and my daughter was crying, so they shot her too.
They shot her again after the first time you told me?
They shot her like 2 or 3 times.
Okay, is there anybody else in the house of your family?
I'm by myself.
Okay, so it's just you, your husband, and your daughter that were in the house?
Yes.
Do you have any dogs, anything in the house?
There was a couple of dogs, but I think they went out when the door opened.
Okay.
I know I've talked about dispatchers on the show previously and how they can be very callous or cold and just try to get information. But the dispatcher that was talking to Gina Flores was nothing but completely empathetic and informative. Throughout the course of the 20-minute 911 call that I found, Gina Gonzalez drifts in and out of consciousness, most likely from blood loss from her 2 gunshot wounds. She doesn't know that she had hit Jason Bush in the leg. She cries that her husband and daughter were just taken from her for reasons that she had no idea why somebody would do this. Why a woman such as Shauna Ford, who did nothing but preach about the murders and the rapes and the drugs that were entering the country, when she just became a murderer and thief herself, she became her own worst enemy. And she took away the lives of a man who wanted to get out of the drug business and wanted to make an honest living and provide for his family, but also took the life of a 3rd grader who just got a new puppy and was sleeping on the couch with it. There was no justification. The only thing that Shauna Ford wanted was more money to fuel her hate-filled, racist, bullshit Border Patrol agency because she didn't have enough money or an honest living to make the ends meet and fund it herself. So she orchestrated the murder of 2 people, a father and a daughter. And keep in mind, Shauna has children herself throughout many of her failed marriages, throughout most of her failed life. And what she thought she'd maybe be leaving their house with, money and jewelry and drugs, she only left with a handful of costume jewelry worth nothing more than maybe $50. This family was torn apart and these people were murdered for fucking costume jewelry. Of course, like it happens with many tragedies, Arivaca, Arizona was thrown into the national spotlight, not only because of the murders, but the fact that the murders were carried out by a militia wearing camouflaged outfits. In the meantime, Bush and Gaxiola went back to Gaxiola's house, but Albert then went back to the murder scene to observe what was going on. He had sent a text message to Shauna Ford saying, "Cops on scene, lay low." Shauna had replied, "No worries, all good, just relax, competition gone." She then started to tend to Jason Bush's wound on his leg, leaving behind forensic evidence at Albert Gaxiola's house. And I can't say for sure if this is a good or maybe a little bit too little too late kind of thing. But the 2 FBI informants that I had mentioned earlier up in Colorado had heard about the murders of Brisenia Flores and Junior Flores, and they reached out to the field office out of Arizona and told them that they knew possibly who could be responsible for these 2 murders. They gave them the names of Jason Bush, Shauna Ford, and Albert Gaxiola. Now, when it comes to Shauna and Jason, they both didn't really have an actual home since they were setting up camps near the Arizona-Mexico border, but they did have an address for Albert Gaxiola. It would only take the authorities mere hours to obtain a search warrant to search Albert Gaxiola's house. When they arrived, they did find trunks that were full of ammunition and rifles. They found Minutemen gear. They found camouflage outfits. They also found medical supplies and bloody bandages that contained the blood of Jason Bush. And they also found Jason Bush's bloody boots. The boots matched the same blood and the same prints that were found at the scene. They then found his cell phone, and when they were searching through his cell phone, they found text message records between Shauna Ford and Albert Gaxiola. They arrested Albert on the spot and brought him in for questioning. Yet it wouldn't be until June 12th of 2009 that they finally catch up with Shauna Ford. They caught up with her at a former associate's house, one that she had connections through before she was ostracized from the Minutemen organization. When she was driving around, the authorities had stopped her and ordered her out of the vehicle at gunpoint. When they conducted a search of the vehicle, they actually found the costume jewelry stuffed inside of her purse. They later caught up with Jason Bush as he had to get medical attention for the gunshot wound to his leg. When they asked him how he received the gunshot wound, he had told them that he dropped his handgun and it discharged a round into his leg. When they were all arrested and brought into the Pima County Sheriff's Department, they were charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of first-degree burglary, and 1 count of aggravated assault. Their trial would not take place until nearly 2 years later. But the citizens of Arivaca came together. As I mentioned a few times in this episode, Arivaca is a very small border town. So when the loss of Brisenia and Raul Flores rang out, the community came together. How could something so horrible like this ever take place in this small border town? The school that Brisenia went to had a mural installed in memory of her and her father. This town was ripped in half because of this senseless crime that this racist pack of morons thought that these people had thousands and thousands of dollars worth of cash and jewelry and drugs, and all they ever came up with was a small bag of costume jewelry. It was such a horrible and senseless act that tore apart a sister and a father from one girl, that tore apart a daughter and a husband from another woman, and left scars on the citizens of Arivaca that still reside to this day. Raul and Brisenia may be gone, but their memory still lives in the hearts of everyone who came into contact with this little 9-year-old girl who just got a new puppy, and this proud father who was well on his way to make a good living for he and the rest of his family. Even at 29, Raul was young, and he still had the rest of his life ahead of him. And that goes without saying that Brisenia was only 9 years old, and today she would be 21, possibly going to college, maybe going out and having some drinks with friends. But of course, she would never get that chance because of the anger and vitriol and hatred of one woman with a lifelong history of bad decisions, bad choices, and nothing to really show for herself, along with another man who indoctrinated her with his rhetoric, with his anger, with his hatred of anybody who wasn't just a white American, and another man with poor intel and a vendetta against somebody that he thought would be competition for the drug cartel. That these two people's lives would be cut short before they ever had the chance to thrive, live, and just breathe. It's truly tragic, because hating people for the color of their skin or their nationality or their heritage or their background is senseless. There's no reason or justification to hate somebody based off of their nationality, hate somebody because they don't speak your language, or hate somebody because they're looking for their own version of the American dream. There's a quote that says, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." And that was by Martin Luther King. And I think that they're very wise words to live by. Because I'm not trying to indoctrinate you, but the one thing that does matter the most is we are all flesh, blood, and bone. You can see somebody crossing the US-Mexico border, but you don't know their story. You don't know why they want to come here. Whether it's to escape a life of poverty back home, or possibly a woman or a man that was trying to escape an abusive relationship. You don't know their stories. You don't know what they've been through. And you don't know what they are capable of. Call me some liberal, softy snowflake. Honestly, I could give a shit less. But I think that the more diverse America is, the better we are. The more that we embrace cultural differences, the better we are. And the less that we let hate and bigotry and racism seep into our laws and our values as Americans, the better off we will be as a country. Anyways, I'm sorry for my tangent. I just don't get it. I never have, and I never will. So that's that. For Gina Gonzalez and her daughter, they leave the Arivaca area and go to an unknown location to avoid media attention and just try to move on from these horrible circumstances. Nobody would hear anything from her until January 26th of 2011, when the trial for Shauna Ford first started. During Shauna's trial, Gina actually took the stand, and she was quoted by saying, "He's all out of bullets by then because he's used them on me and Junior, so he stands there and he loads the gun right in front of her." She said that when describing what was going on with Jason Bush before he murdered her 9-year-old daughter. Due to the nature of Shauna's involvement with this crime, she was eligible for the death penalty, and the trial was expected to last about 4 weeks. And to be able to fall on the death sentence for Shauna Ford was going to be a tricky task, because they had to prove that the intent was to murder these people. But on February 14th of 2011, Shauna Ford was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The next step would be the sentencing to try to have Shauna Ford executed. Now, one article that I found that was made by the Christian Science Monitor was actually covering the sentencing for Shauna's trial. They conducted a small interview with a juror, which I'm just going to refer to her as Mrs. Thompson. But the article reads in its entirety, "Arriving at the death sentence was difficult," Mrs. Thompson said, "but it was aided by a picture of Brezenia presented during trial that was etched in her mind. Quote, a little girl with bright red fingernails. She's wearing a white t-shirt and turquoise-colored pajama bottoms. She's on a love seat. It's a perfect, innocent picture until you realize half of her face had been blown off." End quote. The conscience weighed heavy on these jurors of whether or not the state had the right to execute Shauna Ford. After her being convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, on February 22nd of 2011, Shauna Ford was sentenced to death by lethal execution by the state of Arizona. She is currently spending her time on death row awaiting execution, and any subsequent appeals have been denied and her sentence upheld. When it comes to Jason Bush, he was also found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, and he also was sentenced to death based on the fact that he was the gunman that took the lives of Junior and Brezenia Flores, and his appeals have been denied, and he will be executed by the state. He was sentenced to death in April of 2011 for that. Now, when it comes to Albert Gaxiola, he was found guilty of the murders and he was sentenced to life without parole, plus an additional 54 years. None of these 3 people will ever see the outside walls of a prison ever again unless it's to go to their execution. And frankly, I believe that's where they deserve to be. As far as the rest of the Minutemen American Defense, they hang on for another year or so, and then they all finally disband, and they leave the area of Arivaca. Since then, Gina Gonzalez and her daughter have never made any public appearances or interviews regarding what happened to Raul Jr. Flores and Brezenia Flores. I personally hope that they found some peace in some way, shape, or form. They're victims of racism and bigotry, and, in all honesty, stupidity. Nothing anybody could ever say or do would bring Brezenia and Junior back. But they do live on with the citizens of Arivaca who lost these loved people of their community, and the family that Gina and her daughter still have to this day. I truly, truly hope that in the darkest of times they have found some peace, and that the people responsible will never be out of prison, and eventually will have to meet their own maker and answer for what they have done. And usually with episodes that have particularly troubling subject matter, I try to put out some sort of a resource for people. And the only one that I can really find is one that's published by Very Well Mind. And if you look it up, you can Google 7 strategies to help you on your anti-racism journey. And I think that even if you don't hold a prejudice against a different race or ethnicity, it's definitely something good to read. Racism is a mental health issue. And although it's a characteristic that's taught to people and it's a learned behavior, there always is a way out of it. So that's verywellmind.com, and the name of the article is called 7 Strategies to Help You on Your Anti-Racism Journey. It's definitely worth a read. But that is going to do it for this episode. I did want to throw a special thank you to a couple of friends of mine. One is a patron by the name of Sarah Pancake for helping me with research, and another one to my longtime friend Eric Salinas for actually helping me resurrect my PC that decided to take a crap earlier this week. So thank you both very much for your assistance. And thank you for listening to this episode. If you have the capabilities and you would like to, I would greatly appreciate if you could drop a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because that truly does help me, and if you write something, I will read it in the show. And if you want to follow the show, you can find that on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat at Murder and Such, and you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, the PlayStation Network, and Snapchat at Huntor27. And if you do believe that this show is worth $1 or $2, you can join the Patreon at patreon.com/murder and such, where you can donate just $1 an episode, or you can donate $5 an episode and become an executive producer, just like Stephanie Jacobson, Stephanie Marie, Bex, Fatina Louviere, Mindy Baker, That Dead Body Show, Caitlin Prophet, Casey Jones, Jason W., Michelle Davis, Danielle Kuska, the Strictly Homicide Podcast, the Bama Brew Review Podcast, Aaron Albertson, Michelle Pierce, Martha Pierce, Alex Aguirre, Justin Reebsum, McKenna Johnson, Ariel Saphir, Tracy Ford, Stacy Jenks, Dan Sheridan, Benjamin Welch, Ashley Collier, Charkley Daniels, Erica Summers, Ashley Black and Tech Support, Danielle Longamore, Nature vs. Narcissism, Big Daddy Thick Dick up in Canada, Sarah Thompson, and my lovely, beautiful sister, Sarah Thornton. So thank you to my executive producers. I want to thank you again for listening to this episode. And my name is Hunter, reminding you to wash your filthy goddamn hands, wear a mask, get vaccinated when you can. And until next time, I will talk to you soon. Take care.